So our next session is exactly the kind of training that our panelists mentioned in the previous session. It's a guide to trauma-informed client care. We have Adriana Heffley here with us today. Miss Heffley is a graduate from Georgia State University College of Law. She serves as a director of legal services for Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, also known as GAIN, where she provides collaborative, empowering legal support to survivors of trauma. Having worked with survivors of gender-based violence for over 10 years, she has focused her legal career on humanitarian immigration with experience both as a volunteer while working in business immigration law and as a nonprofit attorney serving survivors in Georgia. As a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, Ms. Heffley has prioritized motivating pro bono service, community investment, and collaboration across local organizations serving survivors. We also have Ms. Christina Scott. Ms. Scott, a graduate of Georgia State University College of Law, serves as an assistant clinical professor in Georgia State's Health Law Partnership Legal Services Clinic, or HELP, where she focuses on teaching both the substantive law her students must understand to serve the needs of the low-income patient population and the larger issues concerning the social determinants of health that affect the lives of clinic clients. Before working in the HELP clinic, she served as a legal aid staff attorney for HELP, addressing the health-harming legal needs of patients at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and their families. Ms. Scott also presents to audiences in healthcare settings locally and nationally about health-harming legal needs and social determinants. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Ms. Heffley and Ms. Scott.
Okay, I get the double challenge of a clicker and a microphone. So we'll see how we do. All right, so today we're going to talk about trauma, how it affects our clients, and in some cases how it affects you, though I know that an upcoming panel is going to be looking into vicarious trauma as well. So there are a lot of working definitions of trauma, but this is one I really like. Experiencing too much, too fast, too soon, in such a way that one's normal ability to cope is overwhelmed, leaving one feeling powerless, out of control, and or disconnected from oneself, family, community, and beliefs. Now, trauma can feel like this every day of a client's life, and it can feel like it only when you're interviewing them. It can feel like trauma just at night. So just as beginning entry level, I want you to just keep thinking that trauma looks very different on each of your clients, and it feels different for you too. And the same things that would cause trauma for your client might not be traumatizing for you. So I think we need to begin today with this understanding that though we're going to talk about trauma and how to deal with it, it doesn't look the same for anybody. So there are 4 kinds of trauma that you need to be on the lookout for. One is acute. This is resulting from a single incident. Chronic, which is repeated and prolonged. So I know a lot of my clients suffer from chronic trauma because their exposure to the health-harming legal needs that they face or to their ill effects of their social determinants of health are ongoing and repeated. There's complex trauma, which is exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events without adequate support. This is also really common in the populations that I know that I serve, where, just as an example from my practice, I may have a child who is homeless or without food stability, and we are learning in our field that poverty itself is a traumatic event, and then maybe that child also is, observing abuse in the household. So it's a complex situation. And of course, more and more we understand that historical and racial factors are causing trauma in groups of people where communities are traumatized. I am not a brain surgeon, but I do know that trauma can change the structure of the brain. And I'm just going to let you look at this. I see some people taking pictures. All right, so in our prefrontal cortex, where rational thinking happens, this is where we have clients unable to make rational decisions. This is where we see that they get fear responses that may seem outsized or sometimes not big enough. I joke sometimes that I'm not afraid of the right things, and though that's a joke that I tell, this we see in our clients too. So they may have irrational fear responses as well. And also we see PTSD affecting this region of the brain. This is also the region of the brain that is, responsible for executive functioning. So your clients might be late. They might be disorganized when they arrive. They might have forgotten that one form that you told them they couldn't forget. This is all because their trauma has affected the way their brain is structured. In the hippocampus, we see responsibility for memory and differentiating between past and present. This is where this section of the brain will shrink under trauma. So if you've got clients who are having a hard time telling the narrative of what had happened to them, if their stories change from time to time, it's easy for us to think that our clients maybe are not being sincere with us, or maybe they're not telling us the truth to get to what they want, but it is frequently because their ability to remember things, especially in a chronological way, has been affected by their trauma. And finally, the amygdala is wired for survival. So this is where we see oversized responses from our clients. Outsized need to stand up when they're talking to you, or sit by a door, or leave early. Maybe they shut down altogether. So we know that the trauma affects the brain. It also affects the body. So we see profound and extensive changes in the body. I don't know how many of you have heard of the ACEs. Raise your hand if you've heard of ACEs. Awesome. So these are adverse childhood experiences, and the clients that we and maybe you in your future careers will experience have high ACEs scores. These are events and things that have happened to them as children that will affect them as adults. Things like poverty, again, being unhoused, being hungry, suffering abuse. I think there's about 40 on the list, and the higher their score of ACEs, the more likely they are to have negative health outcomes later. These are people who are physically sicker as a result of their childhood trauma. So if we see clients who come to us who have been living under these circumstances, especially the kinds of circumstances that Adriana's clients see, they are likely experiencing very physical sensations in their body as well. All right, so trauma it will manifest in a myriad ways. Any of you that have ever had a traumatizing experience or seen it in somebody else, you can recognize these things. Nightmares and startling responses, little and no memory, being dissociated. I'm not going to read them all, but we also see things like substance abuse and eating disorders, so they're manifesting in ways that are affecting all parts of our clients' lives. And so how do we recognize the signs of trauma? So before we can serve them, and that's what Adriana is going to talk about, how do you interview? How do you serve somebody in this way? We have to recognize what those signs of trauma look like. So we see sometimes fear or anxiety, anger, or lack of engagement. It is very hard for your clients to trust you when all of the systems around them have been failing. You will see them be fearful of you, even angry at you when you feel like you've done nothing wrong. They may be disengaged. They may not answer the phone for days or weeks at a time. They may come into your office promising to have a full and robust interview and then be unable to say or do anything at all. Like I said before, they will have lost memory or incomplete memories. They may tell you half of their story one time and the other half 3 times later after they meet you. And it is our job to sit with them and be patient with them in ways that Adriana will discuss to help them build a full memory in a way that does not re-traumatize them. So remember, you are asking them to tell the story of the worst thing that happened to them. People don't come to a lawyer because everything's going well. It doesn't matter if you're teaching or if you have poverty clients like I do, or if you have immigration clients like Adriana has. Nobody comes to a lawyer because their life is great. So just remember, you're asking them to retell the story of the worst thing that possibly happened to them. And if they don't get it right the first time, it is your job to help them. And finally, this inability to regulate or control emotions. We see this in clients who over-talk. I don't know how many of you, I know we've got some practicing attorneys in here, we have some students, and some of you students may or may not have worked with live clients yet. You ever had the over-talker? Like, how do you get the thread? I see a lot of heads. I mean, I have over-talkers in my family, but that's different. How do you get the right thread of somebody who just wants to say everything all of the time, all at once? Right? Again, this is your responsibility. How do you guide them without making them feel shut down or turned away in the same ways that they've been shut down or turned away from the systems that are already broken in their lives? And then sometimes you get the people that don't talk at all. And how do you get them to tell you the things that you need to do to be a zealous advocate for them? They cry, they yell. I've had clients yell at me, not at me, I shouldn't say. I've had clients yell because of the things that are happening to them. So I did not necessarily expect everybody to be so spread out, but I would like you to think for a moment with somebody who's sitting next to you. I see some of you have nobody sitting next to you. I'm not quite sure how to help you with that. Think about if you've had a live client now, knowing the things that you know. I'm going to just give you like 2 minutes to think about it. Have you seen things in your live clients that maybe were traumatic responses that you didn't recognize as responses to trauma in the past? So I guess if you're sitting by yourself, you can just like reflectively contemplate, but I'll give you about 2 minutes to maybe to turn to your neighbor and think about that.
I'm reflecting too. Oh, don't worry about time. I can speed up or, Sorry? Yeah. Oh yeah, we're great. We're great on time. I'm glad that you included an exercise, and I'm not currently planning for something, but if you at the end, if you'd like to tell people that we'll hand this out. Perfect. So I'm just, I'm not coming from the professor background, and it doesn't feel as, I think, natural for me.
I can't actually see anybody, so that helps.
Yeah, that does help, I think. Yeah.
All right, so is this where, okay, so I said 2 minutes. I think that was more like a minute and a half because I looked at my watch. So I'm chronically always running out of time. So here's some robust conversation. It could have been about lunch, but I'm hoping it was about some of the things that you've experienced in your practice or your anticipated practice to be, and so one of the things, and again, we're going to talk about interviewing techniques that I like to think about, and this was one of the most powerful things, and I use this in my life even outside of my lawyering, is moving from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And you'll have to indulge me in a very, very quick story. So I have a son. He's older than most of you, but he fell down. He's about 5 years old. He fell down, and he's crying because he scraped his knee. And I said, "Baby, what did you do?" And he said, "Mom, I didn't do anything." I should have said, "What happened to you?" Right? How did this happen to you? Instead, he felt like I was blaming him. And that stuck with me long before I heard this. So thinking about our clients in terms of what happened to you, so that they are not being, you're not blaming the victim, and to use the colloquial terms. So some of the hallmarks of trauma-informed lawyering is where we're beginning today, identifying trauma and what is it. Secondly, we need to adjust our relationship to our clients. And we don't have time to talk about it today, but this is everything from, as we'll talk about how to set up a room, how to conduct an interview, but how do you do direct exam? How do you prepare them for deposition? How do you work with them to be in a courtroom that might be scary? Adjusting the whole narrative of the way that you interact with clients. If you're writing a brief, what is it that you're putting into the brief? What story are you telling for your client? I do a lot of work on narrative as well, and I caution my students to not be just so curious and so interested in the things that happen to the clients that they start to think that those are the most important things. Many of you are law students, and you need to pick out your evidence that fits the law, not the things that you think are interesting about your clients, because some of the stuff that is interesting to you is traumatizing to them. Adapting your litigation strategy, we talked about that, and I think our next panel is going to talk about preventing vicarious trauma, because we can't do this work if we ourselves are continually traumatized. So I think this is, yeah. So just a little bit about what trauma-informed practice looks like, and then I'm going to hand it over to Adriana. So trauma-informed care, and in my world we use care instead of practice because we also work with medical professionals. But trauma-informed care recognizes the widespread prevalence of trauma and its impact while aiming to reduce re-traumatization. I can't say that enough when you're speaking with your clients who are survivors of trauma, being careful what it is and asking yourself before you ask every question, why do I need to know the answer to this question? Do I have to know it? So integral to trauma-informed lawyering is the practice of employing modes of self-care to counterbalance the effect of that the client's trauma may have on you. And when we're all done, we brought some self-care checklists with a little worksheet on the back. We won't have time to do these with you, but I will bring them down, or I'll give them to the coordinators This is something we use in our class. Our students really, really like it. I know that we've got other panels today on self-care, but I wanted to include this today. And it's important to us because we not only want to reduce re-traumatization, but we want to recognize through our advocacy the role that trauma plays, not just in our relationship with our clients, but in their lives. Okay, so we're going to do one more exercise together, and we'll find out why in a few minutes. So I'm going to take a deep breath in. Everybody, in through your nose. And out through your nose. That always will help calm down the nervous system. You can do it now, and you can do it with your clients too.
Thank you so much, Christina. As the conference organizer stated, I'm Adriana Heffley, and I'm the Director of Legal Services for Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network. And apologize for my voice right now. I'm getting over a little something. I'm not contagious, but I hope that you all can hear me. So as Christina introduced, trauma-informed lawyering, it's not limited to how you speak with the client. Every aspect of your work can be enhanced by an understanding of trauma, from your own mindset to the physical space where you're working with the client to your relationship with the client. When you're meeting with the client, especially for the first time, it's important to recognize that they likely faced many barriers to even seeking your help in the first place, from difficulty with language access to if it's a survivor of abuse, for example, an inability to get out of the house and connect to resources in the first place, to mental health issues that make it difficult to seek out help. It's important to recognize and honor those barriers that your client is overcoming by seeing you and working with you in the first place. And I encourage you to take a look at what can you do to continue to reduce those barriers that your client faces to seeking help. There are a lot of small things that you can do to make accessing legal support more feasible for your client. So for example, at Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, we provide free immigration legal services to survivors of crime and persecution. And specifically, we work on immigration legal cases. Many of our clients don't have the ability to obtain a driver's license. Many of them don't have any transportation at all, don't live near MARTA, have no way to get around. And so often we will help reduce that barrier by ordering rides for them if we have the funds, recognizing that an in-person meeting may not be possible if we don't make it happen for our client. Also, as Christina mentioned, many survivors of trauma experience difficulties with executive functioning. It can be difficult to just get out the door for somebody who's struggling to just live day to day. And with that in mind, be understanding of delays. Be understanding that it may be difficult for your client to find where you are, especially if you are in the city, in a big office building. It can be really intimidating just getting into the building. So one thing that you can do to reduce barriers for your client is to even meet them outside the building. Make sure that they don't have to face that intimidating security guard who's asking them for ID alone. Accompany them up to where you're going to be meeting. You can also encourage your client to bring a support person, although for the purposes of confidentiality, the support person likely can't accompany the client into the meeting itself. The support person can be waiting for your client and go back with them and help comfort them after your meeting. You can also encourage your client to have something to look forward to after the interview, especially if you know that you're going to dig into events that are traumatic. Letting them know, they have something, even just a coffee or getting an ice cream with their support person. Having that to look forward to can help them get through what is likely going to be a difficult meeting for them. Also, consider the purpose of anyone that you're planning to have in the room with you. If you have a paralegal or a support person, if you have an interpreter that you're going to be using during the meeting, make sure that the client understands and consents to that person being there. Eliminate, extra people from the office. If you have a client who's particularly traumatized, this may not be the best person for you to, bring an intern in to, to observe for. This may be the best setting for you to, work one-on-one with the client if possible. If you're going to be using any technology, any note-taking support, make sure to explain the function to the client. I encourage you to take notes on paper rather than using your computer, because that can act as kind of a barrier that isolates you from your client. And also consider the triggers that your client may face in the physical space. At GAIN, we serve a lot of survivors of political persecution, many of whom were tortured by the government. And so sitting for long periods of time, really stark overhead lights, physical aspects of a physical space reminiscent of being detained can be triggering for people who have experienced traumatic events, including political persecution. And so our close partner, the Center for Victims of Torture, who I see Cecil Walker, a wonderful clinician, is walking in now, has explained to us how they set up their physical space in a way that I find really inspiring, and I've had the chance to see it in person on multiple occasions. But the space where they meet their clients, it's set up like a house. It's really cozy. There are cozy table lamps. There are comfortable couches. It's not this intimidating setup that you think of in movies where you see a doctor in an intimidating chair and a patient lying down in front of them. It's like going into your grandmother's house. And so we're really inspired by that at GAIN, and we're applying more principles of trauma-informed care when we're setting up our space, and continually looking for ways to make it more comfortable and to reduce triggers for our clients. So equally important to physical space is your mindset when preparing to meet with a survivor of trauma. Remind yourself that the client's goals are paramount, not what you think is going to be best for them, or even what you feel is going to be best for them. For example, in immigration law, we have this option for survivors of crime called a U visa that can become a path towards obtaining a green card. However, a person can only obtain this visa if they are helpful in the investigation or prosecution of a crime. So we often will speak to someone who is a survivor of domestic abuse, for example, but they haven't taken that step of reporting the abuse to the police. We know that, in terms of their immigration legal case, it may be best for them to report this abuse to law enforcement. But that's not always our client's goal. That's not always what is best for them. And ultimately, they're the experts on what is best for them. Our job is to support them in achieving their goals, not to push them to accomplish what we believe would be best for them. So often, this conversation takes the form of explaining, this is what it would look like if you take this step of reporting it to the police. Here are some potential positive outcomes of that happening that I see. Here are some things that we've seen other people experience when they report this to the police. Often folks are re-traumatized by supporting crimes to the police, domestic abuse to the police. Often, especially those that we work with, immigrant survivors, face barriers in accessing support from the police, are intimidated by it. And so it's just important for us to provide that full information and let the client make that decision with this information in mind, and not push the client in a direction that they're not comfortable with. And as Christina mentioned, really understand what you need as the legal advocate when you're speaking with the client, and what you don't need. And I really love the tip that Christina gave to, before you find yourself asking a question, thinking, do I really need this information? If you are asking just out of curiosity, it's probably best not to ask that question. The last thing that we want to do is traumatize our clients just due to curiosity. Please also keep in mind the impacts that Christina mentioned about the impacts on memory of trauma. People have difficulty remembering events at all. They may remember events in a nonlinear fashion. They may, remember something happening in one date originally, and then the next time you speak to them, they say a different date. They may have flashbacks while you're speaking to them. These issues with memory are not indicative that someone is not being honest with you. They're just hallmarks of surviving trauma. And I'm going to go a little more into how to work with those issues if you have to put together, for example, an affidavit explaining what your client went through. Also consider your own biases. Something that may be normal in the client's experiences may not be normal for you, and vice versa. You are the legal expert, but the client is the expert in their own experiences with culture, religion, and gender, and it's important to honor that. And last, if you do need to discuss traumatic events during a first interview with your client, don't leave that to the end of the interview. Spend the last part of the interview kind of recentering with the client, refocusing the client on their goals, making sure that the client understands what their job is and what your job is, and explaining next steps so that you're not immediately sending them out of your office having gone through some really traumatic information. After ensuring that you're on the same page about the client's legal goals, work together collaboratively on a plan to help the client meet those goals. I find that value statements are really important. Explain where you're coming from. Explain why you're doing this work. Sometimes I will tell clients that it's important to me that our country helps survivors achieve safety. You can give a declaration of your values as a helper to show the client that you care about their case and that you care about their future. So you're here as a helper, but this is the client's case, and the client's wishes steer your direction. Encourage the client to let you know if they're uncomfortable, if they don't understand something that you're saying, if there are issues with an interpreter, if you're using an interpreter, or if they'd like to take a break. And take a look at the client's body language. If they seem to be uncomfortable, you can be the one to suggest a break. If you are feeling uncomfortable or that you're not in the best position to support the client, you can suggest a break. Also, I find it helpful to rephrase your understanding of the client's goals to make sure that you do truly understand them. And this also allows the client to, some more opportunities to ask questions. So some more practical considerations for working with survivors of trauma. Level the playing field between you and the client. This relationship is a partnership where you and your client are both bringing expertise. Be aware of your body language. Make sure that your client knows you're listening and that you care. So no crossed arms. And if you can sense yourself becoming uncomfortable, like I mentioned, suggest taking a break. Just, reset. Maybe dance a little bit, take a deep breath, as Christina suggested. And this is a good time for a mindfulness exercise, and we're going to practice one of those in a moment. Take opportunities to support your client's autonomy. Something that I read in a book on motivational interviewing that I really enjoy is, it's your choice, nobody can make it for you. I think that's especially important to emphasize for survivors of trauma. A lot of the folks that we work with at GAIN have had choices taken away from them for a long time, so it can be really powerful for them to be reassured in this way. But it's also possible that you may have a client in front of you who feels nervous about that and wants to see you as the expert and wants you to make that choice for them. And so I think in those situations, just reassuring them, I'm here to support you in making the decision, but this is your life. You know what you want to do. So one way to implement this approach where you're leveling the playing field and you're making this a true partnership is to ask your client, what they know about the type of case you're thinking of working on together. For example, if you're discussing the possibility of filing a U visa, in the example that I mentioned before, you can ask the client, what do you know about this type of visa? That acknowledges the research that your client probably has already done, and also gives you the chance to address any misinformation that they might have picked up during their research. So each of us has a job in this relationship. You're steering this legal relationship, and you'll have your own homework, of course, but your client should have homework as well. So give your client a list of information, of documents, anything that you need them to collect so that you can further evaluate their case or work on their case. And keep in mind your client's level of literacy. We often work with clients who would take a list home and not be able to do anything with it. So you could draw a picture of what you need. Like if you need their driver's license, you can print out a picture of one from the internet and show like these are all of the things that you need. But making sure that your client has their own things that they have to get, and that they know you have your own homework as well, helps emphasize that this is a true partnership. If the form of legal relief that you're working on requires you to walk the client through traumatic events, like we often have to in humanitarian immigration, I prefer to save this discussion for a later meeting and to reserve this first meeting for just building a relationship with the client, building a rapport, explaining what the process looks like to work on this type of case, explaining each person's job. But I recognize that we don't all have that luxury of time, and sometimes it is necessary to discuss traumatic events during a first interview. But if possible, if you do have that luxury of time, I recommend saving that discussion for a later session with the client. So just some techniques on interviewing a client, digging into that traumatic story with someone who is a survivor of trauma. First, I recommend using a funnel approach to questions, starting with more open-ended questions and then following up with more specifics. So for example, you can ask somebody about the relationship that they're coming to you with, if it was an abusive relationship, and if the conversations lead to discussing a fight, then to try and place that event in time, you can ask questions like, after the fight, when you left the house, was it dark out? And also avoid phrasing questions as accusations. I love the way that Christina put it, moving from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. If you ask somebody a question like, why didn't you call the police? That can come across as an accusation to a lot of people. Here, I do want to add the caveat that, if you're going to be sending the client into an adversarial system, if the client is going to be interviewing or is going to be in court where they're going to need to testify to what they experienced and they're going to be cross-examined, then it is important to prepare the client for the reality that they will get questions like this that sound like accusations. But that's something that can happen down the road once you've established trust with the client, with a lot of preparation that by asking these questions, you're trying to walk them through, what's going to be really difficult in court, and that you don't disbelieve their story. Also, expect nonlinear storytelling and gaps. It's really common in our work for survivors of trauma that our clients do not remember things that happened, the order that they happened in, or whether something happened at all. In humanitarian immigration, credibility is really important, and fact finders who work on immigration cases often lack an understanding of what trauma does to memory. It's our job as advocates to help bridge those gaps and explain in the affidavit. If there are holes, explain, I don't remember this because of the trauma that I went through. You can obtain an evaluation from a medical professional that backs up this person has gaps in their memory because they're severely traumatized. You can show they have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder that makes it natural that they would not fully remember all of these events or the dates that they occurred. But it's really important to address these gaps and not just let them lie there. For a fact finder to then take the gaps and say, this is proof that you're not being credible. As we also address inconsistencies by, not nailing down our clients to specific dates. For example, I'll often have clients that will, tell me something happened at a certain period of time, and then the next time we speak, they'll tell me it happened at a different time. This is not indicative of them being dishonest with me. I just recognize that, trauma makes it difficult for them to remember. And so I will often address that by using phrases like, a few years ago instead of this happened in 2018. So some mindfulness exercises. If you're becoming uncomfortable or if your client is becoming uncomfortable, try one of these. Did you all feel a little bit better after taking a deep breath, as Christina directed you to do? I know, I did. So, in addition to just, recommending that your client take a deep breath, there are some other mindfulness techniques that you can suggest. And sometimes I'll say to a client, there's this breathing exercise that I do if I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And one you can do is called 4 square breathing, where you breathe out for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, breathe in for 4 seconds, and then hold your breath again for 4 seconds. There's also a technique called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing that you can taste. If you're becoming really, agitated and uncomfortable, this can help ground you. And this is something you can recommend that your clients do if they have to then go into court, if they have to go into an interview, if they want to take a moment, they can use one of these techniques later to ground themselves. So working with a survivor of trauma, it's important to recognize as well that their needs extend beyond their legal case. If they, even if they don't come to you with these needs, we like to, ask folks, like, how are you doing with your housing, with food, with mental health? We recommend that our clients get connected with mental health needs in addition to working on their legal case. Also set very clear communication expectations about how often you're going to be communicating, when you're going to be communicating, what exactly is it going to entail working on this case together. And last, continue to refocus your client on their goals, what you two initially talked about, as the reason that they sought your help in the first place. Re-emphasizing this to your client can help motivate them, especially if they're falling out of touch, they seem a little bit less interested in their case, or they're stressed out by the process. This really can help motivate them to continue working on the immigration case, or their legal case with you. All right, so I think that's all that we had for today. We do have this worksheet that Christina has, and we'll be passing that out, but thank you all so much. We appreciate you.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give Dr. Christina Scott and Miss Adriana Heffley a round of applause again. All right, we're going to take a quick break to attend to any needs that we have, and we will be back starting the next session promptly at 1:55.
much. This is not a complete sentence. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna grab you a water.
I think Neve just did that. Or Neve is in the process of doing it.
Okay, everybody, we're going to start with our next section. Okay. Through our first 3 sessions of the day, we've talked about how interacting with clients who may be struggling with their own mental health can be difficult and how we can do that. But as some of our speakers have mentioned, interacting with clients who have been traumatized can also be hard on us as attorneys or law students. So here to talk a little bit about that today is Cecil Walker. Mr. Walker is a graduate of Emory University who also holds a Master's of Family Therapy from Mercer School of Medicine. He is a psychotherapist at the Center for Victims of Torture. At CVT, Mr. Walker treats refugees and asylum seekers struggling with the severe aftereffects of trauma, violence, and persecution in their countries of origin. He also works in private practice, seeing students, adults, and families dealing with a range of issues, including depression, anxiety, grief, and relationship difficulty. Mr. Walker is a published researcher who has presented research at conferences in the US, Canada, and Europe. He also contributed to the book Solution-Focused Brief Therapy with Clients Managing Trauma, published in 2018. Mr. Walker?
Can you all hear me okay? Can you hear me all right? Okay, cool. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I know this looks heavy to talk about trauma with someone from a center for treating torture survivors, but I promise it'll be lighter than it seems. It's also very nice to be in a room with back of the classroom kind of people. I think I was that in school too. Well, just like in the introduction, my name is Cecil Walker. I'm a psychotherapist at the Center for Victims of Torture. I'll tell you a bit about our program and the work that we do, and then I'll spend the bulk of the time talking about secondary trauma and what it's like to deal with the effects on yourself when you're helping a population going through very difficult circumstances. So CVT was started in 1985 in Minnesota, and it's expanded quite a bit. And now we have several programs all around the US as well as around the world. And the program, our center in Atlanta, was started in 2016. And I've been there with them for a few years now. And just like Adriana was saying in the previous session, it's not a very typical clinical setting. It looks nothing like the movie kind of, Freudian psychotherapist sitting in a big chair and the clients are lying down on an armchair, facing the ceiling or something like that. Our clinic is actually a home that's been renovated, and our offices are just small little rooms in that home, and we try to make it as casual as possible. This is the most dressed up I ever really get. Usually we're trying to be as comfortable and as casual as the people coming in to see us, and we're trying to level any power dynamics, any sense of this is a threatening atmosphere or this is somewhere where I'm going to be judged or something like that. And I think that's helpful because a lot of our clients don't tend to always know the difference between the different agencies that they're interacting with, so they're not always sure if we're government officials or if we're medical doctors or who we specifically are that they're interacting with. So across all of our different programs and all the work that we do globally, healing and the direct treatment is only one aspect of it, but we also have a team of researchers, we have a team of advocates. Darlene is our lead advocate here in Georgia, and she does great work with the legislation here in Georgia. And there's been a surprising amount of push forward in helping immigrants. I think recently I heard a bit about how refugees who come here and are licensed professionals in other careers in their countries that were pushing some legislation forward to be able to start to accept that licensure and that education from other countries because, unfortunately, they might be a psychologist somewhere else or a doctor or something like that. And all of that education and experience doesn't exactly translate over, and they're not able to re-enter those fields when they come here. So we do great work on those kinds of things, as well as trainings where we help local organizations or other programs that do treatment, or even sometimes like law enforcement officials or whoever might be interacting with the same populations as us, in helping them to know how to best interact with them in a way that's trauma-informed. These are just some examples of the different types of treatment that we offer. It is mostly individual therapy. So for most of the time, I'm sitting in an office with one individual, and we're discussing, their symptoms and the things that are going on for them. But we do also do groups. We'll be starting a group actually with one of the schools in Clarkston, which is where our clinic is, and there's a large refugee population there. And I'll be starting a group with fifth grade boys. So I hope it goes well for both me and for them. But we do lots of different types of psychotherapy groups like that, including for families or couples or parents, different things like that. Before I jump into trauma and PTSD, everyone at our clinic would definitely want me to mention too that we recently are launching our Afghan program, which is meant to help all of the individuals who fled recently and kind of were mixed up in the kind of last minute change around that happened. And so now that they're being granted residential statuses, we've also been granted some funding to help support them, including psychotherapy, but also community outreach and different things like that. And so that's kind of doubled our staff to be able to support that specific population, which has recently increased quite significantly because of recent political situations. Moving into talking about trauma, I think it's helpful to define what some of these things are and what we're looking at. The reason that a presentation like this is necessary is because trauma can be a little bit contagious, not necessarily that if you stand next to someone who has it that you might get it too, but just that stress kind of spreads a bit. And it doesn't have to be intentionally or maliciously. If you are working with someone who's been through extremely traumatic experiences, you yourself are indirectly experiencing those things with them, especially if they're describing what's happened to them or you're developing a bond with them. And it starts to feel like someone that you know, someone you care about, has been directly in the line of harm. And I included this little box here at the bottom is directly out of the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which we use to diagnose individuals. And this is from the section on PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I just wanted to highlight that someone could acquire a PTSD diagnosis indirectly. They don't have to necessarily be experiencing traumatic events themselves. They don't necessarily have to be fearing for their own lives or experiencing violence themselves. They could get that through their work with someone, and it often does happen for police officers and first responders, things like that. It very well can happen for people in my line of work who work directly with survivors of torture and of trauma. Something I should also clarify is, as scary as a word as torture is, it's more of a political definition. It's not necessarily that everyone that comes to see us have been, held somewhere captive and had very violent things done to them or upon them. It's more about who qualifies as someone who's been persecuted by an authority figure and has had their human rights violated. And so that could be they live in a country that's run by mostly gangs in the area, and there's no protection for them, and so their life is in danger, and they have no choice but to come here as an asylum seeker. Or maybe they are. Sometimes we've seen people who were in a relationship with a government authority figure, and that person was violent towards them, or abused them, or used their power somehow against them. And that would constitute torture. They would qualify as someone who could come to see us in our program as well. So when that word torture comes up, I don't want it to necessarily feel like what we might be depicting is something a bit more extreme than what we typically are seeing. So just to follow up on this definition of trauma, it doesn't necessarily have to just be that you yourself experienced something violent or something that was directly endangering for you. It could be that you know someone, a loved one of yours is being persecuted, a loved one of yours was held captive. It could be that you just know that your race, your ethnicity, your religious group is being persecuted in the community that you live in. And all of these things can trigger trauma or be a trauma event, which can very well lead to symptoms of post-traumatic stress. A lot of psychological experiences can kind of have similar effects on us. And so trauma, anxiety, stress, a lot of these things start to show up in physiological and psychological ways that are very, very similar, because all of them are essentially saying something is wrong. We need to be able to respond to this situation that is very difficult, that is very pressing. And so sometimes that stress looks like I am stressed out by work and all of these emails keep piling up, all these things that I have to do, and that can really start to have a physiological effect, but also it can very much be what we think of in the form of very typical trauma. Or if you are working with someone who's experiencing trauma, and those same things can kind of build up inside of you. And so we have to do something about that process being initiated inside of ourselves, because more than likely that doesn't just reverse itself automatically. If your body's being put into a state of stress, you have to do something to undo that state of stress, unwind, and get yourself back to being into a state of calm, of functioning. Trauma for us as people who work with those who are the survivors of very difficult and violent traumatic things can look similar to the trauma for them, or at least our response to those things, how it shows up in our bodies and in our physiology, our psychology. It can very much change how you interact with people, change how you view yourself, view the world. A lot of our clients who show up to our clinic feel very mistrusting. They feel like they don't want to be out in public because people in general aren't easy to trust. It isn't easy to be around people. Depending on what they might have been through in their country of origin, they even sometimes feel like anyone who is an authority figure, whether that's their boss at work or that's a police officer they just saw in passing in town, maybe that's someone who works at the Social Security office. Any of these authority figures or government officials, they tend to be quite afraid of. And so trauma can have that kind of effect where it changes our perspective, and I think it can do the exact same thing to us who is working with these populations. It can start to make us feel like maybe the world is just a bit harsher of a place. Maybe things are a bit more pessimistic than I originally had realized. And I think in addressing secondary trauma, we do have to be able to catch those kinds of things. I don't know about all of you, but I'll be honest and admit it, during the pandemic, when work went totally virtual and all day long, all we got was just a live stream of bad news, one after the other, both political, health-wise, global, all these kinds of things. And it did start to feel like the lens that I was using to view the world was warping quite a bit. And obviously, this was a very stressing kind of predicament to be in for all of us. But to notice that the way that you feel, the way that you're interpreting things, the way that you're processing your day by day and all the information coming in, that's a sign of being under heavy stress. It's a sign of your responding to something quite impactful in a negative sense. These are some of the things that can happen when you are very close to trauma, experiencing trauma, and working with individuals who have experienced traumatic things. And some of these probably sound pretty familiar. A lot of people who are in jobs where they are either treating or working with, maybe in your situations, you're providing legal aid, legal counsel to individuals who've experienced traumatic things. You're in those positions because you care quite a lot. You have quite a lot of empathy, quite a lot of compassion. This is an area, a population, a subject that's really important to you. And it feels like you just want to ride that to your dream career and let that be your whole life. But there is some risk in that. It is possible to feel like you've hit a wall or that you've kind of burned yourself in how much compassion you're constantly having to give, especially when your work is perpetual. No matter how many people that we see at our clinic, there's always new refugees, there's always more asylum seekers, there's always more work to be done. And so if you're not careful, it could feel like there's just infinite trauma I have to deal with. There's just infinite problems. And every single day I might feel chipped away at. I might feel like I just have a little less compassion to give. I have a little less flexibility and understanding for these kinds of things. What I should say for all of these things, and what might be one of the biggest takeaways, I think, hopefully from my presentation today, is that your perspective matters quite a lot when you're investing in this kind of work, when you're engaging with these kinds of populations. It should feel a lot less like the world is a terrible place and there's so much bad going on, and what's the worth of me tossing this penny into the pile. It should feel more like every individual counts and matters, and every little moment that you share or are able to contribute to these lives makes a big difference and matters a lot. And you should be able to feel like the work that you do is meaningful, even if it feels stressful, or even if you feel like it was a bad week or a bad day or something like that. It's very, very similar to how we might respond to our own kinds of anxiety and stresses. If you're nervous about something, if you're anxious about something, the way you talk to yourself, the way that you perceive that thing is going to make a huge difference in how you're able to deal with that thing and how you're able to manage that anxiety that's going on for you. I guess what should be obvious is that you can take on a bit of similar PTSD type symptoms in dealing with someone who's experienced a lot of trauma, and that's what secondary traumatic stress is kind of getting at. It's feeling like there is some subtle catching of similar types of symptomology that people who directly experience things, you're starting to see that kind of leak into your own life. And I'll talk a bit about the different areas of our life in just a second that we can pay attention to and do something about and notice where these things show up. But I think the first line of defense is definitely noticing those things, being able to catch it and pay attention to those things. Are you feeling a little bit differently? Are you interacting a little bit differently? Are you a bit more tired than you usually are? And it's not for any specific reason. Are you a bit more agitated than you usually are? And it's not just one day, it's several days. It's a pattern of these things going on. That might hint at some of these things coming up for you, that you're experiencing trauma in a secondhand kind of a way, and now you're taking on some of that symptomology yourself. One of the things that I reiterate to people that I work with in therapy, but also just anyone that I might be speaking to, is that we're all human beings, so we're all susceptible to what happens to human beings. We're all susceptible to having a trauma response when we come in close contact with trauma, the same way that you can't assume you just for some reason can't get the flu or you can't get a cold, the same way you can't assume that your car can't get a flat tire. These are just things that can happen. And so it's totally okay, it's totally normal, it's totally human, and to be expected when those things do happen. And so that's one angle of adjusting your perspective and being able to combat the effects that might start to take a toll on you. Is if you're ready and if you're expecting these kinds of things, it's much easier to handle them because sometimes our reaction to seeing that we're now in this traumatic place or dealing with some of these traumatic symptoms can exacerbate what's happening for us, can exacerbate the stress that's going on for us. But knowing that, oh, this is a possibility, and if I start to see something changing, something happening to me, then yes, I can actually be active and do something about that and not have to feel stuck in a place of, oh no, I have this thing now and I don't know what to do with this. I didn't see this coming. Some of these other bullet points are additional things to add to your perspective, just like I was talking about earlier, maintaining the purpose, the meaning, the significance of the work that you're doing. Why do you get up every day to do the things that you do, considering how close to something difficult, something traumatic you're getting? Why do you feel the need to pursue this path, this work, and this career? And the answers to some of these questions should be able to sustain you, especially given that you feel committed to this work and you feel like this is something you want to continue to do. As always with anything psychological as well, I think a really, really important thing to keep in mind is to be intentional. Adriana was talking a bit about mindfulness exercises in the session before this. And one of the best things about mindfulness is how much it makes you be present in the moment. When you have to name 5 things you see and 4 things you hear, or you have to focus so much on your breathing and count to 4 as you're holding in and letting out, it forces you to be right here, right now, in the moment, and that's a very powerful tool against some of these after effects of trauma, whether this is someone who's experienced trauma directly themselves or someone who's experiencing secondary trauma. Anything you can do to be in the moment, to be intentional, is going to make you have that much more defense against some of these effects. This is something that I think is helpful for any human being, since we're all susceptible to all the things that humans can experience. And I think of it as wellness as a whole, in the same way that you might think of like your health as a whole. It's not just this one specific area of your life, work, or these specific conversations I'm having with these individuals from this population. It's the entirety of your wellness that you need to begin to address if you're in a situation where secondary trauma might be a bit of a risk for you. And so what that means is that all of these areas, all these components of your life are worth investing in. And you can't really leave one of those out, especially if you're in a situation where you are up against something particularly stressful. And I think this is relevant whether you work with a victimized population, or if you are just like a clerk working in an office. It's relevant for everyone because stress and all of these things that can lead to some of these responses shows up for every single person, shows up for every human being. And just very quickly to talk about these different areas, because I think this is where our way of responding to secondary trauma is going to really happen. This is kind of the battlefield of how we start to address some of these things. The physical is very obvious. It's how active are you? How much do you get your body moving? Just at a very innate level, our bodies are meant to move. They weren't really meant to do what you've probably been doing all day, sit. And, I'm glad you're sitting and paying attention, but it's that we were kind of built to be active and to move around and to see ourselves doing things. So that's why we always feel better when we're out at the park, or that we had a nice walk, or we feel like we had a long day, but we did a lot. We went to a lot of places, saw a lot of people. There's just something reinvigorating about that, and very natural, and contributes to our overall wellness. Mental kind of includes your psychological health. How well am I dealing with some of those depressive thoughts, those anxious thoughts? How am I talking to myself? That inner voice that I have, is that positive? Is it negative? Is it logical? Is it a bit distorted? All of those things fit into that mental dimension. Emotional, what's the spectrum of emotional experiences that I'm allowing myself to feel? Am I paying attention to the things that I'm feeling? Can I even name the things that I'm feeling? Can I put a label to some of these things? How are the people around me feeling, and how am I taking on those things that they feel? Or how am I responding to some of those things that they feel? Spiritual might sound like immediately it has to be something religious. That obviously is a way to inhabit and contribute to this area of your wellness, but it's actually really about purpose. It's about knowing why you wake up in the morning, knowing why you do the things that you do. If something is hard, why do you work at that hard thing? If you have plans and goals and ambitions, why are those the things that you're going after? If you feel like there's a certain life that you want for yourself, why is that the life that you want for yourself? How do you find meaning in all of these things that you're doing? And you could be a very devout religious person, or you could be someone who considers himself an atheist and still feel like you are able to answer those questions and connecting to a source of meaning, a source of purpose. And that's going to make an absolutely huge difference in your ability to cope with and manage and respond to some of these traumatic responses. And social, obviously, is you feeding whatever it is that your specific social needs are. I myself am not I need to be out with a ton of people every single day of the week kind of a person. In fact, this might check my box for the weekend. um, Everyone has their own needs. Everyone has their own amounts that they have to tend to. And so if you just need to get coffee with a friend a couple times a week, if you just need to make sure you have intimate time with your partner, your family, and that's enough for you. Or if you feel like you need to join a running club and you got to join a book club and you have to kind of expand and have these social circles to energize you and really speak to you on that social kind of a level. Tending to those things and making sure those things get fed does contribute to your overall wellness and is very important, just like all these other areas. Any of these areas I would actually think of as the same way we think of like hunger or sleep or just the need to go to the bathroom. These are things that you have to tend to. They're not really optional, because if you don't tend to them, if you don't eat, there are consequences. There's something that comes up for you. There's some way you're going to be hindered, some functioning that's going to lose some components to it, some aspect to it. I know a lot of you are probably very busy in your life right now, classes and internships and all these kinds of things. And oftentimes students feel like there are sacrifices that are maybe worth making or that they can make, especially in this part of their life, that maybe I don't need to actually sleep, maybe I don't need to actually eat that well, or at least, you know, for this part of the semester, I'll just kind of push through. I'll burn away on just 2 hours of sleep or something like that. But like I was saying, these things aren't optional. If you really want to see yourself do well in the work that you do, if you really want to excel in those classes or show up at work in the best way possible, you would be smart to kind of feed these different components of your life. I always feel like you know, I'm somebody's grandfather when I tell like people in therapy that you know, you should get a good night's sleep and drink some water. But as simple and as commonplace as those things are, they make a huge difference. There's so much research connecting our anxiety and stress levels to how much sleep that we get. If you're able to get whatever the optimal amount of sleep for you is, maybe that's 7 hours, 8 hours. Not that many people really need 10 or 12, or you know, not that many people only need 5 or 6. Most of us are somewhere around 7 or 8 or 9. If you get that optimal level of sleep, that's putting you in a position to be closer to your best self, closer to the best version of yourself. And that's for very innate physiological, psychological reasons. It kind of sets your clocks and your rhythms into the right space, and so that you can be best positioned to operate as functionally as possible. There's a lot of cascading effects on all kinds of hormonal systems and psychological systems when you disrupt some of these things, when you're not eating as often and as well as you need to, when you're not going to sleep, when you're not being as active as you need to. You have to feed all these different parts of yourself, or you might be surprised at the ways that your body will respond, your mind will respond. And so I think that's really relevant to anyone at any point, whatever you're doing as a human being on Earth, but it is definitely relevant when we are talking about how do I manage the secondary trauma that seems to be affecting me in my work that I'm doing with certain individuals. Are we doing all right on time? Okay, great. I could talk about one point for like 50 minutes. self-care is something that I think keeps getting thrown out a lot as like something that is obviously good, and I think we should all be paying attention to it, making time for it. But I don't think there's just one specific kind of self-care. I think anything you can do to care for yourself is self-care, and I think one of the best ways that I think of it as in terms of defining it for yourself is if someone who loved you quite a lot wanted to give you good advice or wanted to take care of you or wanted to prescribe to you what you should do with your time off, your free time, what would they say you should do? They might say, make sure you get some good sleep, make sure you eat really well, make sure that hobby that you really love, you make time for that thing, that book that you've been saying you want to finish, make sure you get to that. That show you really like to watch, sure, maybe you should make some time to watch that. It's caring for yourself in the exact same way that you might care for someone else. It's the same kind of expression. It's the same kind of, I'm trying to tend to the needs that I have. And I think that very much speaks to the last slide, all these different components of your life. If you're able to tend to all of those things, you're probably doing self-care pretty well. It doesn't have to just be you make sure you run 5 miles a day or you go to the spa or something like that. Those things work for you, that's amazing, that's great. If that fits into your life and that fits into your personality, that's fantastic. But self-care isn't this pre-prescribed thing that is already defined for every single person. It's different from person to person, and it actually has to speak to what your individual wellness needs are. Also kind of riding on the heels of that spiritual component from the last slide, if you're finding yourself lacking a sense of purpose, lacking motivation, feeling like you're questioning the work that you're doing or you're questioning your drive and your direction, you might be in need of something to renew your sense of purpose. And maybe that's looking inward and investigating what got you to where you are now and why you're there and where you want to go from there, or what it is that gets you to do the things that you do and gets you to want the things that you want. Maybe it's a conversation that you need to have with people who you trust about these kinds of things, whether that is a spiritual religious leader or that's a family member or that's a colleague or that's a professor or a boss, whoever it is that you might be able to look to say, how do I find some sense of fire for the things that I do, even if those things are really, really difficult, which usually working with populations who've experienced trauma is sometimes difficult. So it's important to take a look at that and have that be included in your set of strategies for how you're responding to secondary trauma. Just like I was saying in the beginning, your worldview is really, really important. People are always asking me, how do I deal with the emotional stress, the toll that it takes on me to be a therapist, especially a therapist to individuals who have experienced such extreme trauma. And they always say, you know, isn't it emotionally draining? Isn't it emotionally taxing? And I struggled for a long time to be able to describe what it's actually like, how I actually see the work. And yes, it can be hard, and yes, it can feel like it requires a lot to do it well. But the way I would actually describe it is not emotionally draining. I think it's more emotionally stimulating. I get to sit with someone who, yes, has experienced extremely difficult things, but I see them here in the US where they're safe from whatever those things are. I see them after they sometimes have very literally walked from South America to the US border with Mexico and made their way to family members or friends or whoever it is that, that kind of called them to come here in Atlanta. I get to experience firsthand some of the most amazing human spirit and strength and ingenuity and resilience. I get to see almost every single day that that is very real. That's not fictional stuff. That's not overly optimistic stuff. That there are people who are stronger than diamonds. There are people who have the will that can get them across the planet, that can get them away from the things that are threatening them and towards the things that they're hoping for. And that's exactly the life that they're living, is something that they just had a hope for wherever they were before, even though things certainly are not all easy and all their issues are fixed just by them being here in the US. But getting to experience that and work with that is very, very different when I look at it that way, when I get to see it in that kind of a way, compared to here's another week, another Monday, another week of I got to listen to what happened to this person. I got to hear more about how war is really ruining the world, how gangs are running rampant in certain countries, and how political regimes and governments aren't doing enough, or they're maybe themselves are corrupt and are actually causing some of these problems for people. Those are very, very different perspectives, and someone in the same work could be living very, very different lives if they hold those different perspectives. And the thing that I compare it often to, like I was saying earlier, is how do you deal with your own stress? How do you deal with your own anxieties? As human beings, we're all susceptible to being self-conscious, maybe. You know, we're worried about how do we look, how do we dress, what do other people think of us, how well am I doing in this class, what's my social standing with my friends, things like that. Anything that might be stressing us out or worrying us. The way that we respond to those things is going to make a huge difference. Nobody has direct control over the fact that you're having a physiological response, that the fact that you are having a trauma response, the fact that you are having anxiety. Like I said, these things can happen the same way that a cold can happen. But where you do have agency, where you do have choice, is how you respond to those things. What action do you take? How do you treat those thoughts? How do you talk to yourself in response to seeing that this is what you're going through? And that's going to make a huge difference. Someone dealing with the exact same trauma or the exact same anxiety or the exact same stress as someone else, these two people could react to those things very, very differently and have different outcomes because of that. They might look very different. They might be managing those things very differently as a result of how they respond to those things. There's a lot also in terms of the boundaries that you should set in professional settings if you are working with populations that have experienced pretty severe, intense trauma. You should make sure that, well, one, that you're aware that this is something that you're susceptible to, that you could be experiencing a trauma response yourself as a result of this work. And so for that, you have to be a bit vigilant against making sure that these things don't run rampant in your life without ever being addressed or without ever having any boundaries around them. Having hard lines on your hours, even though that might be difficult. I don't know what it's like for lawyers. I guess hours just kind of keep going and going, and it's until you get it done. But for us, we try to make sure that one of I think the most important and helpful rules that we have is you can't have 8 sessions back to back from 8 a.m. through the rest of the day, because you're not helping anyone by that second or third session. You feel like you're just there's nothing left to give, and you're not going to show up as your best self. And so there's no reason to try to cram that much kind of sessions into one day. So those kinds of rules, those kinds of boundaries. And if the day is over, there's no need to try to stay later, to try to cram in more sessions later into the night. There's no need to stay awake on the weekends trying to finish all these reports or typing up all the notes for these sessions. What you should do is make sure that you use your time as effectively as possible when you're working. And then the time that you're not working, you use as effectively as possible not working. And that's going to help contain some of the ways that trauma can kind of spill off. Okay. Some of the ways that trauma can kind of spill off into other areas of your life. One of the ways that COVID was really, really difficult for people was that there was no containment of the stress and the work that we were experiencing. Life itself was stress. It felt like the news was always stress-inducing, and the work that we have is always right in our face, right there. You're eating dinner at the computer while you're still in a meeting, all these kinds of things. And we never really completed or contained any of these areas of our lives that were housing stress. And I think that had quite a negative toll on people that people are still experiencing. I'm actually finishing up an article with one of the journals here, online journal at Emory, Southern Spaces, talking about a lot of people have talked about long COVID and the medical after effects of COVID, but I also believe that there are lots of kind of long-term psychological effects of COVID, of being in lockdown or experiencing all the changes and things that happened because of COVID, whether directly or indirectly because of COVID. These are just more professional things that I think that you should tend to talking to colleagues about the things that are going on, finding support groups, investing in you know, how you spend your time. Maybe that's making sure you're getting to those things that are important for you, those hobbies, those social groups, those events, those different things like that. It might seem trivial, it might seem like that's just extra, but those are things that are contributing to your wellness. Those are things that help kind of lock in that you are managing your life well and that you're not getting eaten alive by some of these trauma-inducing aspects of your work. That's pretty much it. I wanted to, though I slightly failed at saving time for questions, but I am happy to answer any questions you have either now or if you want to catch me after this and ask me, but you can also email me or call our clinic and I'd be happy to chat a bit more about the work we do or about dealing with trauma, secondary trauma, things like that. And I think if there's one thing that you take away from this, it's that on one hand, yes, this can very well happen. You can experience some of these very serious effects of trauma in just working closely with people. But the way that you look at yourself, the way that you look at these individuals, the way that you look at the world in general can make a huge difference. I feel so lucky to do the work that I do. It does not at all in any way feel like it's a hindrance or a toll on me. It feels like of all the people in the world who get to sit and hear such intimate, such private, such serious details from people, they're for some reason choosing to be that vulnerable with me. And I get the joy of seeing them progress and do better. I get to see them come out on the other side. And there's really nothing quite like that experience. And for that reason, I feel like I get a bit more resilience from them instead of actually taking on the opposite, taking on the trauma from them. So that's what I would kind of implore as being one of the greatest defenses against secondary trauma. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Cecil, for sharing some of your wisdom and experience with us here today. The way you talk about your work and your clients is inspiring, and I hope that one day I can experience that too in my own practice. Everyone else, let's break for 10 minutes, and I will see you back here for our final session.
Do you want to stand? Do you want to sit? What's your presentation style like?
I'm more of a, yeah, I'm more of a person, but since everybody's so good at it,
I'm fine. Whatever works. We can grab. I mean, we have the mic here. We have a mic you can walk around with. If y'all both individually want a mic you can walk around with, though, we have one right over here, and I can get one to both of you, and you can just.
yeah, we'll just play it out.
Probably. I don't know. understand. I understand. Well, great.
Doesn't really matter. We'll just go with
You can do it. I'll put these mics are on. The mic up here will be on. I'll pull another mic, so you just pick whatever you want to do. Okay. You do whatever you feel like the spirit is guiding you to
That's
do.
awesome. Whatever the spirit provides.
In terms of your PowerPoint, so you have a clicker right here. You just go to the next slide.
Okay.
And this is going to clear up in a second. You'll be able to literally just click play on the video when you're ready. We've already sound checked it. It's perfect. And the only thing you have to worry about is when the video is over, you just hit escape, which is right here, and then you'll be able to click to the next slide. We tested this like 5 times.
Okay, so play, escape, and then next slide.
Yeah, and also I'll be right here, so
Okay.
if you forget at any
And I'll
point,
do the same thing for my
Yep.
little video.
exactly the same, and yours is just on the next slide.
Okay.
Okay.
And there we go. And then the rest of your PowerPoint is there. And that.
So good, because when I sent it, I was like, I could have done that, but
We made it happen. We made it because we just wanted to combine everyone's into one
course.
presentation.
y'all did a great.
Yes.
This is so good. We were just sharing.
I'm so happy that y'all are doing this.
This-
Like, I'm like just,
I wish we had this.
Well, that's exactly why we did this because we were like nobody ever talks about this.
And we want to be authentic as well. And I don't know if y'all want to preface like this is a.
I didn't know if you're introduced, if there's
Because
any
it is
kind
some
of like,
trauma triggering things
Yeah.
in our talks and in our videos. So
Yeah.
do you want to give a disclaimer or you would like us to
What would you feel most comfortable with? I can
I
do
think
it or no.
maybe, if you don't mind doing it, because I have one up there.
Sure.
That can be
That
for my
comes in
video,
video.
but then it comes in like very hard. So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
so
Since we
maybe
just talked about trauma.
in secondary trauma, like along those lines, like,
Right. Like
you know,
this is going to be a heavy next session, not totally heavy. What's the
it'll have a heavy opening, and
And
then
then some
practical-
practical tips for
supportive
you.
things. Yeah.
Like this is what the takeaways is involved
For the day.
education. Not to take notes, but for us to have a conversation that will help you.
Right? So yeah, if you don't mind, like,
Yeah, we can
if
do
you don't
that.
mind doing it, and then we'll take it.
can make that all happen.
Awesome. And I see y'all have, is it a photographer y'all have?
Will you be able to share pictures? We can do all that. We're actually just doing some nice cameras.
Oh, we appreciate that.
We're gonna charge you $500. I'm not doing that.
No.
Students have their cameras. We're making them take pictures.
I like it.
No,
Almost everybody. Yeah. All right. We're set.
No, everyone's gone. You said we lost everybody.
Oh,
The last one.
It
for the day.
dwindles. We're so excited for you to close out the day. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, test.
It's been a long. Those speakers
Here.
here
Are we here?
I just love this song. So I'm just like,
phenomenal.
Lovely reception. Drinks after.
Is Cody here? I thought
I saw Cody too. I don't know if he's been in and out.
Okay.
He's definitely here, but
I have never seen him in person. I've always seen him on video for the wellness.
yeah, because we're both on
committee.
the committee
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
state
yeah.
bar.
Yeah, some people didn't know like he is the person here that interacts with us every month.
Yeah.
nobody told us that. I didn't. I wish somebody had mentioned that to us
So
because
I'll
we had that
mention it.
connection too.
Yeah. So we're both on the wellness committee for the state bar,
Sure.
and he is like the law school representative, like for the office of like law students, like to try to bring things back and forth.
Right. It's so important that we start now.
That was the whole point.
Not wait. Because we have so many different services. We also know the negative effects that can happen to suspended or disbarred because they have to deal with a lot of the trauma and the work and the I won't touch on the as much, but I'm vice chair of the office committee. I have to say, like,
Right.
please come out.
Yeah, do it now before.
Yeah, because disciplinary process is traumatic. Like, going through the office work and having one suspended or disbarred. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, there's Cody right there.
Water would be great.
Yes.
Like Fanta here. Where's
I'll take you. Okay. I'll grab some water. Maybe he's, you know how he talks. Like, all right, we're going to go ahead and start our final session, Wellness in a Demanding Profession. And before we get started, I just wanted to provide a warning that we will be playing a video with some heavier content. It's only about the first 3 minutes or 4 minutes of the session. So, feel free to do what you need to do to take care and to guard and protect yourself during that time. And you're welcome to come back in when it's over. And with that, I am excited to introduce our two speakers. First, we have Ms. Candace McKinley. Ms. McKinley, a Florida A&M University College of Law graduate, who also earned a teacher certificate from Georgia State University's Education Department, created C. McKinley Law, a Black-owned, women-led law firm to give other minority women the opportunity to learn and grow as litigators while still having a life and a family. A former teacher, Ms. McKinley combines her passions for the law and high-quality, sustainable education. As a civil litigator and armed with her prior experiences in the private sector, specializing in the areas of civil rights, education, employment, and personal injury, Ms. McKinley remains steadfast in identifying all opportunities to be engaged, an active participant in causing and effectuating change, reform, and activism. Ms. Joy White is a graduate of Vanderbilt University Law School, founded the White Legal Group in 2022, where she is a highly skilled litigator and businesswoman with a proven track record of providing meaningful and strategic legal advice. In addition to her legal and entrepreneurial endeavors, Ms. White is also an award-winning filmmaker, debuting her first short film, Finding Joy in the Journey, a flawed masterpiece based on her journey of healing, which won Best Documentary and Most Inspirational Film in the Cannes World Film Festival, Most Inspirational in the Top Shorts Film Festival, and qualified as a semifinalist for Best Narrative Short and Most Inspiring Woman in a Film in the Los Angeles Film Awards. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Candace McKinley and Ms. Joy White.
Finding joy in the journey is really the story of my life.
Not a hard one. Well, that's amazing.
Part of that is me realizing that life is a journey. It's a healing journey. It's all a process. When my father died, I didn't know how traumatic that was until I started doing some deep work. I learned at the funeral that I had 8 siblings. And it very much instilled in me a sense of not belonging and just not being welcome. He was 23 and I was 12. He was a grown man and I was a little girl. I should have been protected. When I moved to Tampa, I was trying to figure shit out. I was trying to assimilate. I didn't want to get my ass beat, so I did all the things. I had the hard hairstyle, I had gold teeth, I shoplifted, I drank alcohol, I smoked weed, I did whatever. I also dated a dope boy, and he did things for me that no one had ever done. He bought me things, he did things that I had never experienced. It was great, but he also hit me a lot. And he kicked me, and he choked me, and he smacked me for years. And I didn't know what to do until I did. And one day, I was like, fuck that shit. I'm sick of this shit. And I hit him back, and he never touched me again. But it left scars. I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be Claire Huxtable. I wanted to be that beautiful, smiling, perfect teeth, super happy wife, lawyer, mother. And so I did the things. I went to Spelman, I went to Vanderbilt. I had my son, my third year of law school, but that shit wasn't gonna stop me from being Claire. And then it happened. And by the age of 26, I had it all. I was practicing law, I had a husband, I had a son, and it should have been great, but it wasn't. It did not feel good. It was overwhelming. I couldn't handle it. Being a wife, a mother, a new attorney, it was debilitating. I couldn't breathe. So I took pills. We got divorced. I didn't want to be a single mom again. And I had to learn that my wellness, my healing, it was paramount. I couldn't be a good mother. I couldn't be an amazing attorney. I couldn't be an amazing role model until I healed. That's why I'm sharing my story, because I know there are other women like me that are suffering in silence. And I want them to know that they're not alone. And they are beautiful and they're amazing, and that there is beauty on the other side.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So I am Joy White, the founder and CEO of Flawed Masterpiece, also managing partner of the White Legal Group. I am very grateful for being here today. I'm grateful for you all having me. And then I want to give a shout out to Emory. I took Barbary here. I also shared my personal story for the first time in this room at the pre-law, HBCU pre-law summit in like 2016. So to kind of be back here as a homecoming, to be having this conversation in this room, and we've come a long way in the legal profession. And so I'm just very grateful to be here. So in my legal practice right now, I do employment law. I represent C-level execs, physicians, and doctors around employment agreements, so coming into their positions, and then severance negotiations as they go out. In Flawed Masterpiece, I'll get into this later, but it is a consultancy that I created in 2020. We offer wellness, self-care, products and services, primarily to Black and brown women, just around personal development, healing, well-being. So, as many of you know, and I want to talk about the short film and why I use that as an introduction. Before I speak, before we do much, I show that as the way that I pretty much start all of my presentations. So as many of you know, September was Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and according to the CDC, 1 in 4 women have experienced completed or attempted rape in their life. 1 in 3 women experience sexual harassment in a public space throughout their life. Now we're in October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And according to the National Association Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 4 women have been victims of severe physical violence, which includes beating, burning, and strangling by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So many times we hear these statistics and we know it's bad, right? But we don't always have a face to put with it, right? And so I'm that face, right? So I'm the face, I'm a survivor of domestic violence and of sexual assault. And I use this short film as a way to give a visual image to what we talk about. Because I know we spent a lot of time today talking about trauma, and we're gonna talk about ways that as law students and new attorneys, you can prepare yourself and kind of do things to guard against that. But we also wanna talk about people who may come into the legal profession with a lot of trauma. And then what does it look like, and what are some special things that you may need to do to guard yourself in that situation? And with that, I will turn this over to Candace.
Thanks, Joy. I want to give you all applause for staying the whole afternoon. So we're going to have a candid conversation. As Joy mentioned, we've learned a lot about trauma, but this is your session. This is your time to learn from us. Because again, like Joy said, we're just ecstatic that y'all are getting this now. I came out of FAMU College of Law in Florida. I'm originally from Miami, and I had suffered from anxiety for a long time. And through my legal career, anxiety has shown up in different ways. And I almost left the practice in 2019 just because life was lifing, okay? And I'm gonna be very honest and candid with you all throughout this presentation because I serve as the vice chair of the Wellness Committee at the State Bar, and we are losing practitioners at the highest rates we've ever seen. I wanna give y'all numbers, but it is every month we are losing practitioners from alcoholism, from suicide, a myriad of mental health issues, because we have yet to destigmatize talking about our issues. Lawyers, we have issues. Law students have issues. And it's okay, y'all. It's okay. And by being here today, I just applaud you all. And I'm gonna show a quick video because I had never had a wonderful video like Joy because I have been just with my head down working, but I was working so much, y'all almost thought I was gonna die. I had been doing high-level civil rights cases against police officers, excessive force. We all know about George Floyd. Before that, there were many Black and brown folks being killed by officers here in the South. And so I entered the profession doing these cases, trying to figure it out, trying to be a good lawyer. And the only woman at two minority firms here in Georgia, and the microaggressions, the sexism that I experienced, the lack of understanding that people have for women with children, and trying to dwell in this profession, that I was burnt out. I was everything that was on the screen that the psychotherapist had mentioned. And when I finally left the private sector and went in-house for a school district in 2020, they closed the legal division. And I said, well, what do you do then? So again, I mentioned I already had anxiety. So I have stress trying to figure out how to feed my children, the financial stress. And so this short video is just a PSA for an organization that gave me an award for small business impact because I reopened my law firm that I had started back in 2016 out of frustration. And I want to share that with y'all quickly. Am I doing it right, Elizabeth? McKinley Law & Associates in 2016. I started it out of frustration. Thank you. McKinley Law & Associates in 2016. I started it out of frustration. I was in 2 law firms where I was the only African-American female lawyer. I felt like I wasn't being seen, heard, trained like my male colleagues. These particular firms I was with, I would hope that since we were doing
these civil rights cases and all these things to help our community, that there will actually be some equal opportunity for women lawyers behind the scenes. And it just wasn't that. I had to create a space where I could be well, be authentic, be who I am, and support the next generation of women lawyers and litigators like myself. I had to learn how to operate in these male-dominated situations. I had to speak up for myself. I had to grow. I had to grow as a lawyer, as a litigator, someone who stood up for my clients, but also for myself. I definitely didn't have the capital. I just did not have the funds to invest in the firm like I needed to. I said to Ace, I can do this. I'm getting better. I'm working. I have my paralegals, but I need the seed money to pay them so that I can finalize these cases. Without that seed money, I'm not sure if I'll be sitting here today.
So again, like I was saying, and showing you all that stress can come in different ways. And that PSA was minorities like myself, it's hard to get funding. You think lawyers have a lot of money, they don't. Most of us, some of us are, you know, as my grandmother would say, showboating, you know, putting it out there like you have it, but you really don't. And I went into law to really help people. I was doing public interest, like some of you all may go into, and public interest I knew was not going to, you know, break the bank, but being in practice for the last 14 years and seeing what I had to deal with, it was either I had to figure out a way to practice and feed myself, or I was going to end up conforming to a practice that wasn't healthy for me at all. And I implore you all that you do not have to kind of go through the steps that Joy and I have had to go through, and we're going to share some practicalities, some practical tips about how you can be well in this profession, do what you love, so it can sustain over time.
And I think we want to add, and Candace, you know, just talked about how she entered into the profession. And so a couple of things. One, we want to say how we actually know each other. So we are both graduates of 2002 from Spelman College. And so we have known each other since college. And so it's you know, it's just very interesting how we land back in this place doing this work. But I did want to take a moment to talk about how I got into law, so that when we talk about, and we want some engagement, folks, I know it's late in the day, but when we get to who's in the room, we want to make sure that we cover both grounds. So Candace, you know, started public interest, knowing that she wanted to do that kind of work. I was a summer associate at King & Spalding in 2004. I was pregnant with my son as a summer associate. Started in 2005 and worked at King & Spalding for my first 6 years of practice. So I was very much a type A, I want, you know, big law or go home. Like, so that, you know, we come to the profession with different backgrounds, but also different intentions into how we started the practice. So I know a lot of people who know they are not interested in big law. I want to kind of represent the face and the perspective of someone who absolutely did want big law. It wasn't pushed upon me, it's what I wanted. And there are, you know, unique experiences in big law versus other legal environments, but I do want to, you know, be a voice for there's nothing wrong with wanting big law, because I think sometimes when we start talking about wellness and self-care, it automatically equals no to big law. I don't stand for that. I don't think that's true. There are unique things that you have to think about, though. So I wanted to kind of put that out there. And then we wanted to kind of take a poll, so to speak, of who's in the room around, you know, who is in the room that thinks or knows that they want to do big law. Just raise your hand.
Some okays over here. Is that okay?
We got something for y'all too. We got the okay. So one more time. Definite big law. own that now.
Yes, okay.
We don't have me in here. Okay.
Those in the room who are interested in public interest work around education or anything like that. Okay, so y'all are the majority. You are my tribe. You are my people. I love you and the big laws. I love y'all too. But I would definitely make sure I give you some practical tips because there's a lot of compassion fatigue in our work. So you have to be careful about that.
And anybody who is practitioners in the room, any big law practitioners in the room? Any public interest practitioners? Okay, all right. We just wanted to kind of take a lens, particularly because there are two and we see we're much heavier on public interest in the room, but we definitely wanted to speak to both sets. And there's plenty of things in between, but those are two different kind of sides of the house, and kind of how you start your legal career is different based on kind of what you start. And
So the first thing is we definitely want to, for you all to be aware of yourself. And that is not like, oh, I know I'm Candace McKinley. She knows she's Joy White. Like, really, you showed up in law school, you did all the things, right? You got here by a certain caliber of grit, a certain caliber of go-get-itness, as you must say. So do you know you? Are you aware of your boundaries yourself? Take a minute. What does that look like? If you have paper and pen, if you have a phone, laptop, just take a minute. What is it that radiates in your soul? What gets you up every day? We put on the slide, like, who are you? What is it that makes you you? I do a I am exercise, and before going to law school and all of this, I was a first and second grade education. I love to play. I stopped playing a lot in law school and just had to do the work. But an I am exercise is a little technique that you can do where you can go into yourself and say, I am grounded. I am well. I'm experiencing anxiety. You can do the labels. I am a mother. I'm a student. I'm a father. You can take the time to check in with yourself. And I was shared last week, I was not well. I am experiencing grief. I am sad. I lost my grandmother suddenly and didn't get a chance to say goodbye to her out in Florida. And when you have loss, especially over time, that can get to you. You can have other triggers that can get to you, but you can check in with yourself, I am, and get to a better wellness state. Because I could have checked out and not been here. But I knew I had a colleague who supports me. I knew I wanted to share these stories with you all because the State Bar wants all the practice to be well, from law school in, further on, and even if you have to go through disciplinary action, we want us to talk about these things. So knowing yourself, being self-aware is the first practical tip that we can provide to you about going into this demanding profession.
And I'll jump in right here when we talk about what is self-awareness, like in a few examples of what lack of self-awareness is. So for me, based on some of the things you saw in the short film, so I was very much type A, straight A, straight A student, full ride to Spelman, full ride to Vanderbilt, King and Spalding, and so that was my path, and stayed on that path for quite a while. And it really wasn't until I started doing the work that ultimately led to the business that I now have, that I started to get to know myself. So sometimes people don't understand when they don't know themselves. So I'm an example of someone who was so laser focused on my education, then my career, partnership. I mean, I was very focused. I'm former general counsel of Morehouse College. So I've been like a very career focused type A kind of person. And when I started doing some healing work, it's like, oh my gosh, like there's a whole lot behind here. And so there is a possibility, right? Some people use achievement and perfectionism as a mask. So for me, I was one of those people. So you saw some of the things that I experienced in my childhood, but if I could make straight A's, I'm worthy, right? If I get the job, I'm worthy. You get lots of applause, everyone says you're a great person, and what could possibly be wrong with that, other than if your self-worth is tied to that? Like if your fundamental self-worth is tied to your profession, or the A, or getting, the internship. That is something that I experienced, and it wasn't until I started doing this work that I learned really for the first time who I am. So, there is something to be said, and I do think it's important to recognize when you're a very driven person. I journal a lot now, but I think had I been journaling in law school, some of these things may have been clearer to me back then. I probably still would have taken the same path, but it definitely would have been a more grounded perspective than some of the things that I did and continued to do while dealing with trauma real time in the profession and ignoring it. So I was the person that did not nope, push it to the side, that's not real. That's not real. And I did that until I couldn't do that anymore. And I did that for a long time. So I come here to kind of bring that perspective too, because there's a lot of people that look very successful and they themselves may feel very successful. And there's nothing wrong with success, but wholeness, healthy, friends, sleeping at night, those are all things that are critical. And if you are sacrificing those things in the name of success, I come here to tell you now to take some time and process that, because the law is going to move how the law moves. And we're going to talk about that. But the most important thing is you knowing who you are. And if you don't, spend some time thinking about that now. Journaling, reflecting, meditation, these are all things that you can do to really get in touch a little bit more with how you really feel about things.
And with that, you have to know what you love, right? Check in and say, I love that man, I love that woman, I love my partner. And then, what do you hate? And I know that's a strong word, but it sets up clear boundaries when you start thinking about where you want to be in this profession. If you have no boundaries, somebody's gonna make them for you. Somebody's gonna make you write that brief until you can't write it anymore. Someone's gonna throw you into your first appearance and you didn't ask for help. And you're gonna be like, what do I love? Do I love doing this work? Do I hate this? So when you have a spectrum of love and hate, you can figure out the middle. If you have none, the practice will get you some, okay? And I'm just being honest. And I don't want to be Debbie Downer here to all of my tribe. This profession can beat you down. You can become very jaded and not want to do the work because you came here because you have a love for helping people. I came to law school, like I said, from education, not knowing what I was really getting into, y'all. Law school was not the best for me, but it was the best for me because I learned the love and the hate. And I'm still in the profession because I found a way to coexist in a space that really didn't, I think, see me at first. But now I have a seat at the table. I make the seat at the table because I set these boundaries up and started understanding what we have on the screen now, which is self-care. I never heard of that before. Coming from the South and the first generation to go to school, when do you have time for self-care? You work. No one gives you a handout. You get it done.
So this woo-woo, whatever you talking about, I went to law school because I needed another degree to make money and to feed my kids. Yes, I wanted to help, like I said, but I wanted to help and not be broke. Can I be real with y'all? Okay? Teaching was not supporting me and my family. And I love the teaching profession, that's why I'm still in it. But truth be told, I did not know what a self-care plan looked like. Mr. Walker earlier said it could be in different ways. When you have nothing to go by, I did what lawyers do. I started looking it up. I started saying, well, who writes about this stuff? What is self-care? What is, people call it now the soft life. I mean, I don't know what that is really, but self-care can be anything that you deem as self-care and worthy for your well-being, because you're going to need it when it hits the fan, where you're going from hearing to hearing, traveling all around the state of Georgia like I used to try this case, try that case, becoming a better practitioner. But when I got home, I had nothing left. Had nothing left to give to my kids. Sometimes I look at old pictures and can't remember what was happening at the time my kids were that age. And I didn't realize it till almost the last slide, the last speaker was talking about memory loss. I had been in a state of constant going. That time just flew by. It was just like a fog. And I'm saying this with all of my heart. You want to live your life. You want to live it fully from here on in. Not to say that you aren't now, but whatever it is that you want to do in this profession, you can do it at the highest level and you don't have to give yourself away for it. If you like running, if you like jogging, if you like doing all those things that I don't like to do, I swim. I'm I'm like a mermaid. But all those things, keep doing them. So, questions to you all. Who has a self-care plan that they would mind sharing? Go ahead. And speak loud. You know, we're practitioners.
That's fair. So I try every week to make sure that for 3 days a week with my partner, we do something together. Usually we play video games. Sometimes we watch something. Sometimes we cook a meal together, but at least 3. Ideally, I aim for 5, but at least 3 times a week.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Anyone
Wonderful.
else want to share their well, who has a self-care plan?
You just by show of hands.
Show of hands.
Even if you don't want to share, that's good. Who has a morning routine? Great. I had none. Again, I had nothing. I was like, who does a morning routine? I'm checking the docket. I'm seeing what was filed the night before if I had to respond. I'm going straight. I had a BlackBerry when I started practicing. Yes, I'm dating myself. It was just 2011. So yeah, BlackBerry, my team, right? I didn't want to give it away. They was like, oh, you got to upgrade. But yeah, so a morning routine, a self-care plan. Thank you for sharing. What's your name? I'm sorry. Allison, thank you. Your last name? Attorney Kennington in the making already has her partner 3 times a week doing something that's beneficial for them, and that's important.
I want to jump in here a little bit for the few of you in here that are interested in Big Law, because I will say that it takes a lot of intention, right, to maintain your self-care plan. So if you have a self-care plan, all these things, and I am definitely an advocate of that, it will very much be ultimately on you to understand the importance of this. Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Big Law is like, your wellness matters. Some Big Law does feel that way, and they have committees and all the things. But ultimately, if you're a litigator and if you're a junior attorney, right, that billable hours are billable hours. There is an energy to Big Law. There's just kind of a way that it works. Again, I was a summer associate in 2004, started at King & Spalding in 2005, where we didn't have e-discovery yet. So there was actually like physical banker boxes that we're going through discovery, like writing on it. Y'all may not even know what I'm talking about. But I mean, old school. I mean, 15-hour, 16-hour days, celebrating, staying in the office because we get to charge dinner to the client, right? So we all get to eat state dinners and stuff, but it's 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And it's like, look at us, look what we're doing. And so in those settings, a lot of times that's glamorized, and a lot of times the only other people you talk to are other lawyers in big law. So you can get this sense of, this is just what it is. This is just how it's gotta be. That is not a sustainable way to live for anyone. But it doesn't mean that you can go in there up to the managing partner, of the Atlanta office and tell them, hey, change everything about how this business is run. I am not gonna, in honesty, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that that's a winning approach, particularly as a summer associate or a new attorney. But what is a winning approach is you knowing very clearly what's healthy for you, having a plan already, and when we talk about self-awareness, being really clear, is this a good fit for me? So, big firms have an energy to them, period, especially as a younger associate. That's just the facts. You have to know now yourself, is that a good fit for me? And it's okay if it's not. Because I know when I came out of law school at Vanderbilt, big law was the only option. Like I told Candace, I didn't know the public interest people. They were there, but I didn't know who they were. And so it's okay to want that, but you've got to have a lot of intention, a lot of intentionality if you're choosing to start your career in a very large law firm. They're gonna pay you great money, you're gonna have great benefits, and there's gonna be an expectation that you give it your whole life. That is just what is expected. Now you know what's right for you though, right? And so that's why I really want to make that point, because again, people are motivated differently. Some people want that, some people don't. But even if you are a person that wants that, it's still okay to want balance and be thoughtful and intentional about your plan on how to do that.
Yeah, and a practical tip that you can go look up if you're seeking a big law setting, the American Bar Association's website, the big law firms, some of them have taken the next steps to sign a pledge around wellness. So that could be a step that you can look up and say, okay, at least if they sign the pledge, it's being talked about in this setting, so that could be helpful. And even if you're not thinking about that route, even going into a public interest field, be it Atlanta Legal Aid or any of the different organizations here and throughout the country, you can ask these questions at the interview. Do you all have a wellness strategy here? I mean, however you want to phrase it. What does well-being look like here for you? Can you tell me your well-being practices? Because you all have to know the power you hold coming into the profession, because as Joy lifted up and I talked about my BlackBerry and the banker boxes, the law profession has revolutionized with technology. And you all are bringing those skills of using technology at the highest levels that we weren't, and most of the senior partners won't know. So you all are bringing something that we need into the profession, and they want you all, but you also can bring what you need. And that is setting up those boundaries, what Joy is speaking about, what I'm speaking about here, knowing yourself, having a plan so you can sustain. If you came to law school for these 3 grueling years to practice law for a few years and go do something else, that's all well and good. But once I sat for that bar exam and got my license, I was here for the long haul. This is my 3rd career. My first one, raising kids. Second one, educator. 3rd year, this was it. I wasn't quite ready to do anything else. So if you want to sustain in this profession, you can show up
and put it out there in a very respectful way, what you will and will not do in order to support the firm, support the organization, so that you can maintain your wellness, maintain a professional practice, and sustain your practice, however it shows up. Y'all following me? Okay.
And I want to add just too, because I told Candace, see, we feel differently about that. I'm like, do not go in big law time, but this is what I will do, this is what I won't do. Do not do. Like, so I feel very strong like that. I can't say that that will work. There's still things you can do, though, with your own intentions. But I will say things also that are in the profession. Candace mentioned it earlier about the number of suicides, right? So there is a lot of addiction and other issues that are normalized in the profession as well. So we tend to talk about it once it kind of hits a certain point. But you also have to go into the profession very self-aware of how you want to manage yourself when it comes to drinking, when it comes to doing any other substances, because there's a lot of it. Let's just keep it real, right? There's a lot of it, and a lot of people do things to sustain, like they actually do things so they can keep working. I know there are sometimes I've experienced some people that dealt with depression and took antidepressants regularly, but then would go off the antidepressants because they wanted to be sharper for a trial or for something. And there were some not great outcomes from things like that. And so this is stuff that happens all the time, and it's rampant. And so we come here to have this conversation with you so that you all go in with your eyes open, and that you also don't, I don't care where you end up, you don't have that kind of presented to you like, oh, this is normal, this is just what lawyers do. It may be, but it's not healthy and it's not sustainable, which is why I'm so glad that you all are having this conversation now. You're even hearing these things now. For me, I didn't learn any of this until I learned it myself at the end of like crash and burn style. There was no discussion around it. So I am not going to say that the legal profession overnight is going to change. The profession is the profession. However, you go in knowing who you are, what's right for you. And again, if it's big law, you don't have to tell them what you're not going to do. However, you can know what you're not going to do. And then operate and make boundaries and create plans around that, so that you can create your own boundaries. And I think just if you know that you want an environment that is going to be very open to wellness, self-care, all those things, boundaries, mental health days, those kind of things, look for that. Like, look for that and know that that's something that is still not super common in our profession. It doesn't mean it's not becoming more common, but it's not something that is at the forefront that I'm going to sit here and tell you that that's like what the whole rave is. It's not. So the onus will be on you to understand yourself and choose environments that are going to be most supportive to you and your well-being.
And what we're looking at from the state bar's level and when we work on the wellness committee together is thinking about what a well attorney looks like post-pandemic. Are we checking in with our mental health supports? Are we taking that PTO if it's offered? But we pose this question as, what does a well law student look like? Because if you are well here, when you transition into the profession, then that question becomes a non-question, that we can say, this is well lawyering. This is a new phenomenon, you all, that we were talking about this just 4 or 5 years ago. We started the wellness committee at the state bar. So we're still learning, and 3 of those years was in a pandemic. So how do we still interact with our clients? How do we still interact with ourselves here? How do we interact in law school? You know, some people cannot be around people as much anymore. I'm one of those people. I love people, but at a certain dosage. I had COVID twice. Again, it almost killed me on top of the profession. And being in education, being in-house, one of the mandates were you have to be physically in a building. Well, if the building has students piled up in it, and they're not doing, students are just not doing all the protocols. Of course, COVID is going to run rampant through the building. And when I got COVID the second time, I knew I could not stay in an environment that did not put my wellness at the highest level. So what are you doing? I share that to say this is all new again. The technology is new, COVID is new, post-COVID. We're all grappling with this about what is well lawyering, but what is your plan for your wellness here? What can you do to help us help you as students? What do y'all need? I'm gonna take a pause because that's what we do in the education field. Keep it real quiet because we can talk all day, but when we leave here, is it going to be the same or is it going to be different? Because the statistics are too high for us to come here and sugarcoat it and make it look like it's all roses, because it's not. The profession is even more demanding than it has been because we have to still service our clients, still service and do all of those things, but with all the technology and all the draws and the pulls, and how do you manage that? What is it that you all can help us figure out? And I'm talking to give y'all a little pause because we want y'all to help us help you. Like I said, if you can articulate it and not afraid to share, what is it that a well-law student needs now? Are y'all getting what you all need? Do you know what you need? There's a lot of rhetorical questions. Anybody want to share, if anything, that you all think that you may be missing now in law school that we could possibly support you on? Anybody? Everybody's good.
And it's okay if you, and I'll just say, and we're open to questions at this point too. So on that point, but also we're open for questions now about anything that we've shared, because we want, this day to close with you all at least feeling like you have access to ask any and everything about the whole day. So,
Go ahead.
yes, sir. Go ahead. Way in the back. Mm-hmm.
So the curve structure, yeah, that has not changed since we left several years ago. But I will tell you that there is work being done around the nation, around law schools, and any of the professors can jump in, the way law school is being taught, because the bar is going to change. You probably heard of it in 2026. The bar will be different. It will have more practicums on it. So with us being outside of the law school profession, just know that there is work being done, and professors throughout the country are working towards not just the grading, but the overall structure of law school, because it is not always beneficial for 3 hours of auditory listening in a class. That is just against education norms. And I would tell you, coming from Georgia State education program, before I went into law school, as a child, you learn in different ways. It can be kinesthetic, it could be tactile, it could be all these different modalities. So now that we know that, yes, it is going to change when, in terms of actual getting to the grading, not sure, but change is coming.
Question here. Agreed. Check.
Yes, I mean,
All the above.
all I can say is we show up how we show up. And I would tell you, I show up as a multitude of things. People are not sure who I am. That's why I have to be clear of who I am when I show up in spaces. So similar to law school changing, the profession is changing just because the demographics are changing. Women are graduating from law school at the highest rates. Now, the statistics doesn't show women staying in, especially big law, and becoming senior partners. However, we are entering the profession at the highest rates than most other folks who identify. So again, being vocal at a certain level, wherever you show up, I'm very vocal, and it has hindered sometimes my growth, because I have been, how you say, your services are no longer needed here, Candace. And I had to take it, right? Because I was being my authentic self, but I hadn't been polished enough. I hadn't had enough decorum at that time as a young lawyer. But continuing to hone those skills of just excellent work, and then bringing that into the space that may not be as welcoming is key. Because when you're there, you're undeniable because you're excellent, one. Two, you are you. And three, you know yourself and you have your boundaries. And you will know when you go into certain spaces if they're ready for you. If you're not, you may have to, circle back and come back to that space or disengage, depending on what you really want to do long term.
Yes, go ahead. I have all kinds of theories about that. It definitely makes sense. I do think there's certain people, like there's a certain type of person that is drawn to the profession, which I do think sometimes plays out in this, if you hate working hard and, you don't choose this, so I think sometimes you get this group of people that are kind of predisposed in a certain way, then you put us all together. And then it's like, and only one A in the class, right? And so that just fundamentally, to your earlier point about the grading, it does embed some kind of fundamental competitive nature, lack of collegiality. Shout out, y'all are already here, but I will say, one of the things that was unusual for me at Vanderbilt is it was very collegial, which is not what I had heard, right? I did not hear that any law school was collegial, so I was actually shocked to see how collegial it was, but I understood that was very unusual back then. And so I do think there's work that has to be done, and I think part of this conversation is important, right? Because what we're talking about today, it plays into this. If people feel more like they're in community, more like they can be transparent, one, it helps to alleviate some of the things that we've been talking about today, but it also contributes to more of community. I will say that I think it's up to you all, as Candace said earlier, in my opinion, big law is not taking the lead on this, but you do have impact, right? And so coming in with this intentionality, whether you do public interest or big law, but even if you go into it with this, okay, I'm gonna play the game, But this is part of I'm bringing something to the game too, that y'all might have not been ready for. And over time, because you all are the future, right? Like it's new lawyers. I mean, they make all their money off of, the new lawyers. So you do have a lot of leverage. I think it's just part of why we're talking about this is there's a balance of being self-aware and also understanding what is the profession, what's just facts are facts about the profession, be self-aware about where you're going, and then once you've done those things, then kind of see what you can do. We're doing what we can do, you guys do what you can do, but I do think it's important to go in with eyes open about what you're walking into and some of the systemic issues that are in the profession. Reiterating what Candace said earlier, we are at an all-time high in suicides of lawyers. That's a heavy point, but an important point. And so we're at the State Bar of Georgia, both of us on the Wellness Committee. Candace is the Vice President. But that's also why we're here, to have this kind of real conversation about what you can do, what you're walking into, and then how to set your intentions around being the healthiest that you can be.
Yes. That's a great question, and I want to kind of go back to a prior speaker. I think it was from Atlanta Legal Aid, when you self-disclose, your health concerns, and a certain environment doesn't see that as a real issue. Like, you need to show up. I had pre-existing conditions in my work environment, and they still made me show up, and I could not physically show up. I was literally in a COVID recovery center, like physically. So there was no showing up for Candace. And so I don't want to just be blunt, but I'm going to be blunt. You cannot, let me choose these words. You cannot stifle your next step because the current situation will not be malleable for you. They will not bend. However, you can take that same fervor if you're healthy enough and you have self-disclosed, you've done all you can, and I'm an advocate, I'm a staunch civil rights, I'm gonna change something. I'm gonna find a law review I can write on, I'm gonna get with the law professor, so somebody is gonna hear what I had to say. And I'm saying this to say, when I had my second child, she was 9 months in law school, I was breastfeeding at my law school. And there was no breastfeeding area. They put me in the back of a dirty closet for me to breastfeed my child. And I said, this cannot be. No one should have to do this. So I started a parent advocacy group at my law school with other parents so we could have healthy spaces to bring our children and to nurse if necessary. That is common practice now in law schools. It wasn't just in the early 2000s. So what you're saying now, law school will not be in person forever. It won't be. Next semester, it will be. You see what I'm saying? You have to be the advocate now, even though it may not benefit you, you have to find a way so the next generation could see it and benefit from it.
and I don't have all the answers. That's why we're having this conversation, because you will find the answers. Somebody made ChatGPT to help you all. I was like, this is fascinating. Wow. Give me the Cliff Notes in ChatGPT in 2 minutes. Come on. No, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying, change is here, it is now, but it will take time in our profession because it is a dinosaur profession. And it slowly, some parts are becoming extinct and others, you know, you gotta force the envelope. Did I answer your question?
In large part, yes. But I guess the challenge then is that the people who need the advocacy don't have the literal energy or bandwidth or time. It's like I could either pass law school and maybe keep myself physically healthy enough to pass law school,
Yeah.
or I can, it's like choose two, with advocacy being the third thing. So are there other advocates are there resources that exist to help advocate for that population? And or where are the most effective pressure points if we have a finite amount of energy, we can only push on one? Would that be APA? Would that be the dean of admissions? Or I guess the dean of law school now, knowing like where, you can only have one punch.
Right.
I have a response on that because you did make a point. I mean, I think at your level, and again, so I'm all about, leverage and, I would say as a current law student, determining who in the law school has leverage. Because I'm just gonna be a current law student, I mean, you could write something and, but like in real life, is that gonna move the needle? Probably not as much, and again, we don't always feel the same about things. So we have different perspectives, but I would say find the person in the law school that has the most leverage, and have that conversation with them. If there's someone that does work in that area, like if they are former practitioners, they bring that, to the table. So I think there's ways to do it. Have that singular conversation with them and tell them, hey, this is what I would like. You did bring up a good point that I want to take a moment to say. Sometime self-care, your own self-care and your own well-being it has to be prioritized. I will say when I was at King and Spalding, I did a whole lot of pro bono work because obviously I wanted to be a public interest lawyer, but I was like, I need this money. So I just did all the billable hours, and then I did all this pro bono work, asylum work, trafficking work, truancy work. I mean, I got like the pro bono award every single year. They're like, Joy is just doing all the things. When I look back on that, right, I'm like, ooh, you probably shouldn't have done that, right? Because when I think about the burnout that I experienced, right, I think part of it was I was trying to solve for things by helping other people that I probably needed to point at me. So to the point, like, there may be this instinct to like, let me go do all the things and do. I would very much focus on what is it that I feel so drawn to do for other people, and see if you can't point that at yourself. In my work over the time, I realize a lot of what I've done in support of others has been, a trauma response, frankly. I help others in ways that are things that I needed. And it took me a very long time to understand that. And so a good bit of my burnout actually came from overextending myself in ways to support others. So you brought that up. So I'm like, even if it's hard, I would have the one conversation with the person that has the most leverage, and then reserve the rest of your energy for your own well-being and self-care.
Yeah. And we're wrapping up to just provide resources, building off of that question. If there's not a supportive person here, I will hope there is, because Emory has been great. The State Bar has a law student representative on the Wellness Committee. So each of the law schools, Mercer, Georgia State, Emory, that meet every month. So if it's a topic or something that you all would like us to grapple with, send it to your representative here at the law school, and we'll take it up at the bar. The QR code goes straight to Lawyers Living Well at the State Bar. For the practitioners in the room, You all can definitely use the resources now. As part of your state bar fees, you get 6 therapy sessions included. So if you haven't used them this year, please do, because you've already paid for them. Another speaker said, get therapy, get therapy. It's okay not to be okay, but if you've never, talked to someone else for whatever reason, it is helpful. I didn't seek therapy until my father passed in 18, and I shared I almost left the practice in 19, and it was because of acute grief and depression and still trying to practice and seeing all the trauma from the cases. I saw a lot of death with these civil rights cases, and it was heavy. And how do I continue to do that work when I'm grieving myself? And I didn't have the language at the time or the therapy had enough self-care and know to ask for help, because we are a strange breed. We function at this level and we think we're gonna be okay, and I was not. And so I'm saying that all to say, you have services here at Georgia State. Once you, Emory, sorry, Georgia State, all the law schools have services for you all to check in the best you can. And at the state bar, once you've passed the good bar exam, that has not changed yet, it will change in 2026, you all can get services there. And lastly, Charity Scott, who is a practitioner who has passed over at Georgia State, wrote some great articles that I knew nothing about until recently about mindfulness and what that means. So I'll leave that up there for a minute. And also another resource, there's the Institute of Wellbeing. It's a national institute that has convened, and they're having a wellness online, so everybody doesn't have to come in person, in January. So these slides will be available. That Institute for Wellbeing is a hyperlink, so you can check that out. It's a movement afoot. You all are part of the movement. We want to support, continue to share our stories, continue to learn from each other, have these collective conversations, because the legal profession will not survive without the change that is here. And we just really thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, one more round of applause for Joy and Candace. We're so grateful for both of you for coming and speaking with us. I'm going to welcome Corey back up just to recognize some of our pro bono students who have earned a certificate, and then we're going to do some thank yous and proceed to a wonderful reception.
Wow, what a great day. I hope you guys learned as much as I did today. And I just want to say thank you to all of our speakers. I think every panel had a lot to contribute and was really informative. And want to take one more chance to say thank you to Elizabeth and Claudia for putting this together. You guys knocked it out of the park. It's great. Thank you. I have the great opportunity now to recognize our students who have committed to significant pro bono service over the last academic year. Emory law students are in the community doing wonderful pro bono work every day. Last year during 2022-23, Emory students served over 4,000 pro bono hours with over 50 different legal services and governmental organizations. So you guys are out there making a difference in the community and learning valuable skills while you're doing it. So I commend all of you who participated in that program. 63 of our students last year served at least 25 pro bono hours and won our pro bono certificates. All 63 of them are listed on the screen here. I'm going to call out the names of the current students who I think are here now, or at least have not told me they wouldn't be here. And If you are here, please come up and get your certificate. Wait on the stage until everyone is here so you can take a picture. And congratulations to everyone, and thank you for putting in the work. Martin Berg, Ann Burley, Jacob DeFazio, Brandon Dodds. Now I saw Brandon here. Yes, okay, because they're going to take a picture of everyone together. Andrew Hull, Flannery Josie, Alex Klein, Hannah Krozik, Akshaya Natarajan, Travis Snyder, Kendall Schutzer, Abigail Sepik, Amanda Shaheen, Shayla Shatabi, Sabby Simone. I know I saw Sabby here. And Sydney Tardy. Congratulations again to all of you. Thank you for your service.
All right, thank you everyone for being here today, and I ask you to stay with us just a little bit longer while I say some thanks to some other people. First, thank you to our wonderful speakers for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us here today. It is so greatly appreciated, truly. Also, thank you to Georgette Thin and Corey Hirakawa for all of their support in the process of planning this conference. I would also like to thank the entire EPIC board for supporting us over the past 2 months, namely Ashley Adisho and Madison Farley. Then, Claudia. I would like to thank my dear friend Claudia for so much support and love over the past few months and all the hard work she puts in. She's truly an inspiration to me, and I'm just so glad we got to do this together. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how to do those. Oh, okay. Wonderful. Okay, as you all know, we are the Emory Public Interest Committee. We are this organization that supports public interest students at Emory Law, and one of the ways we support these students is by raising funds for an EPIC grant so that they can pursue public interest jobs during the summer and be supported as they do work where they're not being paid. So we do ask that if you are able, you could donate through the QR code here or this website. They'll take you directly to where you can donate and help fund and support our students over the summer as they pursue work they're passionate about. Thank you.